Hello everyone and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 19th of May. It's been a while since we've had a chance to all get together, and of course there have been some very exciting things going on, as I alluded to in my Twitter and Instagram messages, and also told you guys that the last time we spoke I was going off to get married to the beautiful Cassandra. Cassie, good classical name, and we had not only a spectacular wedding in which the sun was shining, but then also a wonderful honeymoon. We went to the Aeolian Islands off the coast of Sicily. Now, this was a part of the world that some of you may have explored. I have never actually been to the Aeolian Islands before. Those are the volcanic ones of Stromboli, Lipari, Panarea, Filicudi, Alicudi, and Vulcano. And we had an idyllic time getting away from the world for a little bit on little islands, off an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it was blissful. But, of course, it wouldn't have been a holiday without a quick trip to an archaeological museum. Yes, I managed to convince Cassie, just for a little bit, that we should go to an archaeological museum on Lipari, which is the main archaeological museum for the entire Aeolian Islands. And believe me, it is worth a trip, all of itself. The Aeolian Islands, beautiful places, lots of lovely, great stuff to eat, beautiful views, stunning scenery, nice to be by the sea. But, of course, the key thing, the Archaeological Museum on Lipari. And I suggest that you give it some time, because it is actually housed up on the old kind of Acropolis of the island of Lipari, right by the port, which has also then over time been the place where a number of the churches have been built. It was actually a castle at one point as well, and you move through the castle walls and then go into lots of different buildings across the whole of the Acropolis to study and see the material from different phases of Aeolian Island history. And it is an extraordinary collection going all the way back to the Neolithic period, showing that these islands were absolutely inhabited from the earliest days of human civilization, right the way through to when the Romans came along and sort of put paid to the Aeolian Islands as well as to Sicily, when they sort of put them under their thumb, and culture sort of went a bit damp and dark for a little while. But up to that point, it was absolutely stunning. And a couple of my absolute favourites, I'll be sharing pictures with you over the different social media feeds and on the Facebook page over the next couple of days. But some absolutely stunning pieces that I've never seen anywhere else across the Mediterranean world. Little terracotta figurines of women making food, but then with a little cat sitting on the edge of the bowl where the food was being prepared, all done in beautiful terracotta that was then kept as a grave good and put into someone's grave on the Aeolian Islands. Or an entire selection of children's toys, absolutely beautiful ancient Greek children's toys, again terracottas, done with little bits of ribbing and kind of things that the baby thus could touch and begin to get that sensation of touch and feel of different textures and the same, just like we do with modern toys today. But they were also then shaped into fun shapes, again, just like we do with soft children's toys today. My favourite being that of a little kind of dolphin that had sort of ribbed edges and a little bit of rough here or there for the baby to be able to touch and play with. And the dolphin has a big smile on its face as well. So just two of my absolute highlights from the Lipari Archaeological Museum, and I would suggest that you get on your way there as fast as you can. It takes some time. You've got to fly to Sicily, then you've got to get up to the northern coast, then you've got to take hydrofoil to get you into the Aeolian Islands, but by golly gosh, it is worth it. Helen is asking, which do we recommend of the islands in particular? Well, it depends whether you like more or less people and how dangerous you like your holidays, Helen. Now, all of these islands are volcanoes, right? And they're all, to differing extent, live volcanoes. So Stromboli is the one that catches all the newspaper headlines because it's the one that pours out lava most frequently, and you get those fantastic pictures. People go on boat trips to see Stromboli by night, to see the lava coming down the side of the volcano. But if you're on Vulcano, you don't so much get the lava, but what you do get is sulfurous gases. Last November, the entire island was actually evacuated because the gases got so noxious that they were kind of causing ill effects to the entire population of the island. Then if you want somewhere really small, you want to get away from it, then Alicudi is probably your place, where there is a permanent population of just 40 people, kind of just nestled nestled onto the side of the volcano that is that island. And there's a wonderful picture that I will dig out from one of the brochures they do of the alien islands, where it is a cross section, not just through the islands, but also through the sea. So you can see what is below the water in this area, and you really do realise that it is just a string of volcanoes that we can see, and also a string of volcanoes under the water that we can't see, that are kind of make up the entire geology of this area. So it's very much an interesting way to live, that you are constantly within sight of a smoking or erupting volcano, and indeed several of them. But what a wondrous part of the world. So I hope you guys have been having a lovely couple of weeks as well, and it's a joy to be back with you today. Helen asked, how do you get there? Yes, from Sicily by boat. You can also get ferries that go from Naples, from Palermo on the western side of Sicily as well. A number of different ways to get there, but once you're there, you're in for a treat. So I hope you guys have been having a great couple of weeks as well. It's lovely to be back, as I said, and we have got some brilliant questions, as always, coming in from you guys that I can't wait to get on and have a chat with you about. So the first one comes from Stephanie Kirk, who has been asking about another island, about the island of Ithaca over off the coast of Greece. Now, Stephanie's asking about, are there any resources around the so-called School of Homer on Ithaca, and whether it was set up by Homer himself or by the result of followers. Stephanie loves the island of Ithaca, finds it difficult to find any historical references on Homer. Yes, Stephanie, you are not alone, right? But there are two problems here. One is Ithaca and one is Homer. So William Moulton tells us it's Happy Norwegian Independence Day. Indeed, Happy Norwegian Independence Day to you all out there as well. I hope you are celebrating, William, indeed. I heard that, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday was National, in the UK at least, National Pinot Grigio Day. Now, not quite of such import, I presume, as to many of us as Norwegian Independence Day, but a day to celebrate nonetheless. And I hope that a day or two ago you all had a glass of particularly Pinot Grigio in your hands. But if you had another tipple, then we will forgive you. There we go. So the question from Stephanie was about the School of Homer, and the problem first is Ithaca. Now, yes, in the Odyssey, the good old story of Odysseus, where is he trying to get home to? Where is his journey, his nostos, his return home, taking him? It is, of course, to the island of Ithaca. Now, and so we presume that this is the home of Odysseus. Quite right, absolutely. But actually trying to find evidence of Odysseus on Ithaca is a very tricky question, for two reasons. One, there doesn't actually seem to be a lot there. And in fact, it's only in much later centuries that we start to see people thinking that Odysseus was there, and so creating pots, coins, remnants of kind of remembering the idea of Ithaca and of his journey that is encapsulated in Homer's Odyssey. So there's nothing there from the time that we think the Iliad and Odyssey were composed, which is the late 8th and early 7th centuries BCE, or indeed from the time period when we think the Odyssey is being written about, right? So the era post the Trojan War, which we think, if there was a historical battle which was the direct correlation for the Iliad, the Trojan War of the Iliad, then it probably occurred around about 1250 BCE. So we don't have an Odysseus's home on Ithaca that we would like, but also there's the question mark of, is Ithaca modern Ithaca, ancient Ithaca? And this was a big issue about a decade ago when people started actually claiming that modern Ithaca is not ancient Ithaca, and there's been a whole series of geological changes, which means that actually ancient Ithaca is a little bit of Kephallonia. And now we won't go into all of these problems, but that doubles up our problem. Now, the School of Homer that you are referring to on Ithaca is a set of kind of ruins that are clearly ancient, but they've been nicknamed the School of Homer in this sort of desperate attempt to attach and fixate and have something where we can go to on the modern island of Ithaca and think about Homer. And some people call it the School of Homer, and some people call it Odysseus's palace. It's probably, in fact, it's definitely neither. I'm very sorry to disappoint you, Stephanie. In fact, we're not really quite sure what it is at all. So we've got the problem of Ithaca, and where is Ithaca, and that we don't have much from Odysseus. But if we want to make this even more complicated, we don't have much idea about Homer either. Yes, so this is the problem, that we attribute these great works of the Iliad and the Odyssey to Homer, which, if you've seen that famous picture of him, he's got sort of long hair, he's got a beard, and he's famously blind Homer. But that picture, that portrait, that statue portrait is again from the 2nd century AD, so it's fairly late on. And by this stage, people were asking lots of questions themselves in the ancient world about who Homer was and concocting, frankly, backstories for him as an individual. So by this stage, Iliad and Odyssey, absolutely central works of literature that everyone thinks are amazing. There is a school of Homer, or rather kind of the sons of Homer. They're called the Homeridae, and these are all the rhapsodes, the poets, the tellers of the Iliad and the Odyssey, who school themselves as being sons of Homer, attributing back the origins of these two poems to Homer, and thus trying to sort of say that they're as good as Homer in reciting of his poetry. So we've got sons of Homer going around reciting the Iliad and the Odyssey. We've got lots of interest in the stories themselves, and indeed in the places that are mentioned. And in the 2nd century AD, we get our famous portrait of Homer. We also get a writer called Lucian doing a dialogue supposedly with Homer, in which he goes, right, Homer, finally, I've nailed you down, and we can ask you all the questions about your life that we just don't know anything about. So let's start off with the basics. Where are you from? We're not really sure. And in this dialogue of the 2nd century CE, Lucian, or Homer's Lucian rather, comes back, well, some people say I'm from Chios, some people say I'm from Smyrna. These are all places over in the Eastern Greek world, and in fact many islands just off, or places on the west coast of modern-day Turkey, of Asia Minor. And it was very much thought that while there were lots of suggestions for where Homer came from, it was definitely from this eastern part of the Greek world from which he was born and which he came. And then, of course, kind of there are lots more stories told about him. And why is he blind? Well, the word, in fact, homeros, might mean blind in one kind of way of translating the word. There's also, of course, the story of the blind rhapsode and poet within the Iliad and the Odyssey himself. So we get all these kind of stories merging about Homer, but we don't know if any of them are true. In fact, some people will go so far as to say, Stephanie, am I really ruining all of your beliefs here, that Homer never existed, that there was never a single person who composed the Iliad and the Odyssey, or there might have been at least two different people who did it, because the Iliad and the Odyssey that come into fruition around the late 8th, early 7th centuries BCE, seem to be at the end of a long process of rhapsodes, generation after generation, these poets, these composers, generation after generation, reciting, improving little bit by little bit, adding little bits here or there, refining little bits here or there, passing it on to the next generation who do more. So the Iliad and the Odyssey become not the product of one genius mind, but actually the end product of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over many generations perfecting the art of storytelling, particularly around the Iliad and the Odyssey. So there's just a few problems, Stephanie, with the school of Homer, so-called, on Ithaca, so-called, by Homer, so-called. But hopefully that at least gives you some good things to go and explore. You can go anywhere in the Greek world and you can say, I'm in search of Homer, and you can be having a very lovely time doing it. So great stuff. Good evening, Patricia. Good to see you. Thank you so much indeed all for your comments coming in. Will there be some wedding photos shared? Well, alongside those photos from the Archaeological Museum, we might throw out a few photos from the Aeolian Islands as well. Do keep your eyes peeled to the Facebook page and to Twitter and Instagram as we go over the next couple of weeks. Now, we've got another question in here from Rebecca Louise. Well, actually, it's from Rebecca Louise's 5-year-old son, who's currently obsessed with playing cops and robbers. And his question is, what were ancient Greek prisons like? Now, I love this question because it's one of those things that we so rarely think about. We think about the great temples. We think about all the democratic buildings where they got together and talked about stuff in ancient Athens. We might even think occasionally about some of the beautiful athletic stadiums and other paraphernalia that they constructed. But what about prisons? What about when you did stuff wrong? What happened? Well, Athens is a really interesting case because we seem to have a prison not located in some sort of back area of Athens where people didn't really used to go, but actually in the very early days of the development of Athens as a city, one very central, just off the agora, the marketplace in the very centre of Athens. Now, it's a bit of a shady history to this building because it might well have been at one point the sort of headquarters of one of the early tyrant rulers of Athens. Then it seems to morph into this kind of prison structure, and there seem to have been a number of different locations where people that we hear about in the literary sources were held at different points in time. But we need to step back a second and just think about what policing, if you're going to play cops and robbers, you need to think about policemen in ancient Athens as well, because there wasn't a police force like we think of it today in any way, shape or form. Really, it was a sort of self-policing society to a certain extent. You know, if you saw somebody doing something wrong, it was your job as an individual citizen to then drag them off to the authorities and then indeed prosecute them in court. There was no criminal prosecution service or state to make a case on your behalf. You had to bring a case against someone if you thought they'd done something wrong. Now, the Athenians did have at different points a sort of police service, but they, in the 5th century BC, this was a bunch of foreigners, Scythians, in fact, the Scythian archers, they were famous, who sort of ran around Athens, and they were the sort of heavies that got sent in if there was a real problem. And you had this bunch of foreign Scythians with their arrows who would turn up if there were problems. So you had done something wrong, maybe the archers had come after you, but otherwise your fellow citizens had sort of done a citizen's arrest, as it were. They brought the case against you, you'd been found guilty, and then where did you go? Well, it wasn't often prison that was the answer, because at the end of the day, prison's quite a difficult and time-consuming and financially very expensive way of punishing someone. You've then got to hold them in prison, you've then got to feed them, you've got to look after them for the duration of their prison sentence. So prison kind of sentences for being found guilty are often of very different natures. They would be fines, they would be exile, or they could be, of course, death. Now, famously, Socrates is our guy in 399 BC in Athens who gets condemned to death. And we then know that post being condemned to death, he's taken to prison, which is where he is then forced, or asked rather, to drink hemlock, poison, which will kill him by his jailer. But the dialogues that are written about Socrates' final days gives us a really interesting impression of what prison would have been like, because he gets visited by a whole bunch of his mates. They have this whole entire dialogue that is set in prison while Socrates is waiting for the jailer to come with his cup of hemlock to drink, and in fact the jailer then does so, and kind of Socrates takes it and drinks it, and then people stay with him kind of while the effects of that are felt on the body, and he's finally paralysed and dies. But he's also, during the course of this discussion with his mates, given the chance to escape. So I get the impression that Athenian prisons were not exactly foolproof, maximum security places in any way, shape or form. They seem to have at least allowed a back door or two. So it's a really interesting mix. They definitely were there, but they were not a central part of the society, and not a sort of very big part of the society in the way that sadly they are today. But kind of at least they did exist. They were fairly centrally located, not kind of condemned to the margins of society, and seem to have been places that really, if you were there, you really were in trouble, because you weren't going to be there for long. You were either going to escape or you were going to be forced to drink hemlock. So Rebecca Louise, thank you to your son for his fantastic question about prisons in the ancient world, and particularly in ancient Greece. Time is flying by, so we will very, very quickly do a bit of in the news and what's going on, because we then have a question coming to us direct from Kyiv in Ukraine, who has got it. One person has got in touch. Anna Polishchuk from Kyiv in Ukraine has got in touch to ask us a question about slavery and ancient rhetoric. And I mean, amidst everything that is going on in Ukraine, Anna, I salute you for sending in your question to the Facebook Q&A, and I very much hope that you are able to listen and that you are with us today, because we are coming to you to give you an answer. So hold on tight for just a couple more moments. But in the news at the moment, we've had some rare coin hoards from Constantine's reign being discovered in Switzerland. A tourist has crashed a drone into another Roman monument in a latest mishap. I mean, this is one of these things that is just getting more and more ridiculous. Yes, drones have nice cameras on, which means you can get nice tourist shots from the air and nice videos to show to your family back at home. But if you have a bunch of drones flying around and you're not really paying much attention, and it's always going to end up with there being crashes of either drone into drone, or indeed drones crashing into monuments. So this is why most countries are now legislating pretty heavily about personal drone use anywhere near archaeological sites, and good on them. In Egypt, there's a ruins of an ancient temple of Zeus has been unearthed in the Sinai. Now, I don't know if you've ever been over to the Sinai. I've been there. In fact, I kind of have a memorable memory galloping a horse through the desert in the Sinai many years ago. But Egyptian archaeologists unearthed the ruins of a temple to Zeus in the Sinai Peninsula Peninsula. The temple ruins were found Tel El Farma archaeological site, which are in the northwestern Sinai, which is known by its ancient name of Pelusium, which was in use during the Greco-Roman and Byzantine times. So the remains there apparently date then and transfer through to the early Christian and then early Islamic period. So they actually have 3 different religious cultures being worshipped there, which is absolutely brilliant. Stratus, you're asking about Socrates' prison has been identified as a cave somewhere near the Agora. Yes, we don't know that the Socrates was taken to the place that we have identified archaeologically. It's just by the Agora. Traditionally, and that's where the signs are that tourists go to today. The cave is between the Pnyx and the Agora, isn't it? So again, still a very central location. It's not actually somewhere that is kind of way out. It's very near the law courts. The law courts were all in, again, and around the Agora, the central marketplace of Athens. So it's both the business of condemning the person, their trial, and then of where they get taken to afterwards stays very much in the heart of the city. We're getting back into some of the other amazing things that have been found. Archaeologists reveal Bishop Stortford's past as a Roman new town that sprung up as a transport interchange, the Roman equivalent of Birchanger Green M11 services. Absolutely brilliant. Go Bishop Stortford. What a past, what a history. I love these. We'll be putting up all these links, of course, on the Facebook page, or rather they are on the Facebook page, and we'll be reminding of the ones that we're picking out now as well. But this has to be my absolute favourite from BBC News. It came out on the 7th of May. In 2018, Laura Young purchased a bust at Goodwill, a second-hand shop in the Texas city of Austin in America, for just $35. She photographed it strapped into the passenger seat of her car, and an independent antique and vintage dealer, she went just into the thrift store hoping to find something cool. But then she looked at the bust and thought, actually, this looks really old. She did a quick Google search for Roman marble busts. She thought it looked a bit similar, and she made inquiries, and the statue turned out to be a 2,000-year-old Roman bust from the 1st century BC or the 1st century AD, of now quite high value. Laura Young, absolutely brilliant and well done. And here we are, we're all going to head off now, aren't we, to have a look through all the different thrift and antique and second-hand stores that we could possibly find. This was also one of my personal favourites, that Tiziana D'Angelo has been appointed as the new guardian, the new superintendenza of the ancient site of Paestum in Italy. She is one of the youngest people to direct a big Italian cultural site, so crucial like Paestum, and is one of the very few female directors that have ever been appointed. This is a really great and important appointment, and all power to her as she takes the great site of Paestum forward into the future. And then we must move on quickly to talk about some of the things that are going on. Now, if you are in the area of Warwick University, tomorrow, Friday the 20th of May, we have Fab Fest. Yes, the entire Faculty of Arts building, brand new building, which I'm sitting in right at this moment, is being officially launched, opened, celebrated, and there is a whole day of free, fantastic activities going on. If you just Google Warwick University Fab Fest, you'll find them all online. Do come along and join us. Lots of great stuff going on, including lots of ancient stuff where you can come and do some Roman cooking with us. You can come and explore our archaeological collection that we have here. You can get some hands on some real coins. You can also be part of the Delphic tree dedication ceremony. Yes, now some of you may remember that many eons ago, back in 2015, in fact, I did some work with the Greek Press Association in the UK. And as a result of that, they very, very kindly made a personal gift to me of a tree that had been grown from a seedling from Delphi, but also then gifted to the University of Warwick a whole set of these cypress trees that had all been grown from seeds that came from Delphi in recognition of my work on the Sanctuary of Delphi and more widely in public engagement in ancient history. Now, these trees have been growing slowly from their seedlings as the Faculty of Arts building has been growing here on the ground at Warwick, and now finally we have been able to take delivery of over 40 of these trees and plant them in and around the Faculty of Arts building. And one of the particular spaces we've created is a sort of Delphic garden area that, just like Delphi's great motto, Gnothi Seauton, know thyself, this will become a space of self-reflection and thought for our students and also for visitors to campus. And tomorrow we get to officially dedicate this garden. And we have the dedicators, the Greek Press Association, representatives of the Greek Press Association and more widely of the Greek community from London coming up to be part of the celebrations. We will be pouring pagan libations to the gods, to the ancient Greek gods, into the earth, as well as reciting some of the best bits of ancient Greek poetry relating to Delphi and to the god Apollo. We will be making a few speeches as well, and you are welcome to come along. That will be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Do come and witness the tree dedication ceremony, the Delphic tree dedication ceremony, and from 12 o'clock through to 5 o'clock and then onwards into the evening, there will be Fab Fest going on as well. So do come and join us if you can. In the end of July, 30th of July, there's going to be an archaeology day at the Roman Circus Visitor Centre in Colchester, if you're anywhere near there. Natalie Haynes Stands Up for Classics is recording, and you can listen to a live recording of her on the 8th of June and the 29th of June. That's in London, if you're anywhere near there. And we also have some great new stuff coming out online for you to have a look at. Against the Law podcast, which I did one for about buildings earlier on, has done one about hair, hair in the ancient world. We've talked about hair and monobrows fairly recently. So you need an ornatrix, which is the Latin for hairdresser. And also the History Hit podcast, The Ancient Guide to Healthy Living. I think we could all do with a little bit of that occasionally, kind of especially now. So we have a chance. Get back to Anna Polischuk's question from Kyiv in Ukraine. I hope you are there and able to listen to the answer that I will attempt to give to your absolutely brilliant question, which is, did slavery embedded into the core of the Greek world affect ancient rhetoric? Now, this is a brilliant question. It took me quite a while to think through. So, kind of, obviously, slavery is just a fact of life, right, within the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. And you've asked particularly about slavery within Greek democracy, so we probably have to bring ourselves into Athens. And there we have a situation where something like, at its max, 50,000 male adult citizens were the democratic citizens, the ones who actually had a say in what went on. But if you add in women and children, and then you add in the slave population of Athens, we're getting up into something around the 250,000 mark of people. So a significant percentage of the community of Athens is a slave community. And being a slave and having slaves does not seem to have struck these ancient democrats, these Athenian democrats, as at all hypocritical. Democracy was for the elite circle of citizens, and they sat on top of a slave population, as well as on top of those who didn't qualify for Athenian citizenship because at different times the rules were different, but you didn't have two parents who had been Athenian. You may be a foreigner, complete foreigner, trading in Athens, but you're never actually going to have a political say in Athens. So Athenian democracy was quite an elite little club that sat on top of a huge number of layers of those who didn't quite make it in, at the bottom of which was all the slave population. And of course, even within the world of slavery, there was a massive spectrum, because you could have a very, very well-educated slave who would be the tutor in your home to all of your citizen children, right? You could have slaves doing very important administrative tasks within this political system of Athenian democracy itself, all the way down to the so-called chattel slaves, the slaves that dug the silver mines of Athens. And this was considered to be the worst of the worst kind of slavery, the lowest of the low, if you were sent down the silver mines. So there was, but how does this kind of layers of society, with our democratic citizens at the top who are doing all the talking in the assembly and in the law courts, where the rhetoric is being used, how is what they are saying affected by that set of strata going all the way through down to slaves at the bottom? How is that affected? That's Anna's question. And there's a brilliant book that I would point you to, which has just come out, called Insults in Classical Athens by Deborah Carman, now, who looks at the way in which people insulted one another, both within the law courts courts and more generally within the agora and more generally just within ancient society. And there seem to have been a couple of sort of general ways in which you can insult people within the ancient world. So, you do it through cowardice, you do it through kind of insinuating they might be a criminal, you do it through insinuating sexual deviation, right? Kind of those are the sort of standards. But then in Athens, particularly what comes through is that you can insult people, just as you might be suspecting, I think, from the way you've asked your question, about not being a proper citizen. So, you insinuate, you insult, you kind of poke fun at that maybe they or several generations back in their past might have had some dodgy ancestors who weren't quite within the democratic club, that may perhaps have had relations, or they might be the children of relationships with slaves. And of course, when we get into 4th century Athens, it is possible for slaves not only to gain their freedom, but then to be given citizenship of Athens, very famous family, the family of Passion in the early 4th century BCE, where Passion was a slave, became a freeman, became a citizen, became a banker, and actually ended up as the richest citizen of Athens. But that wouldn't stop the fun and the insults, particularly for his descendants, about where he had come from, where his descendants had come from, that they were originally descended from slaves. So you could mock people for not being a proper citizen, or indeed, kind of even worse than that, perhaps potentially being engaged in commerce and trade, so being in having to work for a living, as opposed to just being a very kind of wealthy individual who could sit back and take part in democratic discussion without having to think about it and find the time or the money to be able to do it. So, Anna, thank you so much for your question. We send all our thoughts and best wishes to you in Kyiv at the moment, and very much hope that you've been able to join us today, or at least watch this Q&A on catch up to be able to enjoy it. And please do send in more questions. This is a fun distraction for you with everything going on right now, I am very glad indeed. Keep those questions coming. And we are out of time. We haven't got through all of the questions that were there today. Rachel Campbell was asking us about Achilles' character at Iphigenia in the play Iphigenia and Aulus. We will come back to you on that. Tracy Rabeotti was asking about the symposium episode of the Ancients and about the synergies between science, technology, and the study of the ancient world. We will come back to you in the next Q&A. But I have sad news. The next Q&A will not be for a little while, because I'm back from honeymoon. I'm back, but I've now been called on jury service. So I'm going to get my own experience of ancient or modern rhetoric in the courtroom. But what it means is the next time that we will be able to come together is going to be the 30th of June. At 5 p.m, 30th of June, 5 p.m, I will be here. I hope you guys will be there too. That's going to be quite a big day, because here at Warwick there will also be a public lecture that I'm giving that evening, about an hour after I talk to you on the Q&A, that you guys will be able to come to if you can make it to Warwick for 30th of June. So you can listen to the Q&A, or perhaps if you guys are going to be able to come along, we can do a sort of live recording session of the Q&A with those who are coming for the lecture as well, and then come along for the lecture. This will be about welcoming people to come and study with us as mature students at the University of Warwick for classics. So this will also, Claire reminds me, this will be the next one on the 30th of June, will be Q&A number 98. We are so close to the 100th podcast. We're getting there. We will get there. But please do join me on the 30th of June, 5 p.m. And in the meantime, have a wonderful month. I hope the sun shines for you wherever you are in the world. And stay safe and look after yourselves. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.